So Pillars of Eternity 2, maybe I like this kind of info more than most, but like how many hours did you put into it? How big is this game?
It's real big. It depends on how you play it, but it's a game built to be enjoyed across the many different ways you can play it. Like playing through that game, if you're like, I'm going to critical path my way through Pillars 2, you're like, just don't do that.
Yeah.
Just don't play it then. Because the whole idea of the game is that it's a big archipelago of islands that you're exploring. Cool. So it's kind of got, think like Baldur's Gate, but pirates and sea shanties and exploring over the horizon kind of
Wait, did
vibe.
the first one have a pirate theme?
No.
Or was that... Oh, okay.
It's totally new to this game. So it's like a different part of the game world. The story is continuous, although it's pretty standalone here, but it does follow through. You can play the same character you played in the first game, and
cool.
It picks up where that game left off in that your fortress that you built up all the way through the first game gets destroyed. To start the game.
Figures.
Perfect.
Video games!
And to...
that 80 hours you spent?
80 hours you spent just gone. And so to avenge the 80 hours that you spent, you go pursuing the entity that caused the problem, which is a god that rose up out of the earth from beneath your fortress and has gone marching off into the sea for unknown purposes.
You get to see him wade into the sea.
Yeah.
Big things in water really do it for me. Like in Skull Island when Kong is like walking through the water and it's just like barely up to his ankles. That looks so good.
You get to see it in the sense that you see the footprints and you see like cut scene art that shows it. I mean, it's an isometric RPG, so like we're not talking about like giant special effects cinematic cutscenes.
I feel like we should set this up with that isometric RPG thing a little bit more, because there have been a fair amount of these coming out in the last couple of years. It's an interesting resurgence or bubble in the industry here. So this is Obsidian's sequel to Pillars of Eternity 1, which came out 2015?
Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah.
Okay,
and that first one was kickstarted, right?
Yeah, I think so.
This one was not.
I mean, Pillars of Eternity was a really great game that more than anything else really helped to solidify this resurgence and kickstart this resurgence of that genre. There have been some really great games in the interim, not the least of which I would count Divinity Original Sin 2.
Yeah.
I personally really love Torment, Tides of Numenera. Those are both games that I think did some really unique things within the space and it got people excited. Pillars of Eternity 2 distinguishes itself with its pirate seafaring setting more than it does some dramatic reinvention of gameplay. I mean, in a lot of ways, if you have a fondness for those old Baldur's Gate games, that this isn't Dungeons and Dragons rule set, but it's awful close conceptually, right? You're going to be able to drop into Pillars very quickly. But you're going to get this injection of the sea shanties sung by your crew, and you're improving your ship and putting new cannons on, and you're having ship-to-ship battles.
Sea of Thieves fans are going to love it.
Maybe so. But there's a lot more storytelling and building up your party and having relationships and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So it seemed like you gave it an 8.75 in your review. I mean, is just the easy diagnosis here? Like, if you love Pillars of Eternity, this is a twist on it, but still ultimately more Pillars of Eternity.
Yeah, I think if I would go one step further than that and say that if you love isometric RPGs, or you've always been curious about it, this is a great game to play. There's some characters that carry over and some concepts that carry over if you haven't played Pillars 1, but I think they do a really good job of introducing those concepts and getting you up to speed about the world and what's going on and who you're playing and the couple of party members that return. It's fine. You're not going to feel completely lost.
Yeah.
And this is just the more evolved version of the game. I think it's a better game than Pillars 1 now, right? But it should be. It's several years later.
Okay.
And like I said, I think there's some other folks that have done some really interesting things in the space in the years since that have continued to move the genre forward. And so we have to look at it in its moment of time. Right. So it actually scored a little lower from me, but not because it isn't a great game. It's just that there's been so much evolution there within the genre. that has to be set against those other games.
Yeah. I feel like I'm isometric curious, as you call it.
Sure.
And I feel like there's just been this huge bombardment of these type of games. And I tried to go back to Baldur's Gate like 4 or 5 years ago. And I'm like, oh, I can't do it. It's too hard.
The remake, even the remakes of Baldur's Gate, which are really cool.
Yeah.
Those games feel very antiquated now.
Oh yeah. But I'd love to like experience that and what people like. Like I played the only thing I really dabbled with was like Fallout 2 back in the day. It was like, if you consider that kind of game.
Yep.
But so what would you say Pillars 2 is like I should maybe check that out if I wanted to, or is there another one that's like better to check out for if you're like me and very curious?
If I was pointing you towards games to try in that space, I really would point you towards one of 3. Pillars 2 is the natural evolution of what people liked about Baldur's Gate, but with this awesome pirate setting, and if that's something that really does it for you, and you also want the gameplay systems to be familiar but like more accessible than they were in Baldur's Gate, go to Pillars. If you want a little bit more drastic reinvention of gameplay systems, I'd point you towards Divinity Original Sin 2. That game in particular, the choices that you make and the party that you build up, you really feel like you're sort of organically shaping the world around you, and that's really neat.
Also, Dante gave it a 9.75.
That's right.
He really loves that game. I wouldn't say that personally I love that game as much, but I think it's great.
Okay.
I actually put Divinity in a very similar play space in my mind of quality to like Pillars, which is to say,
very good.
It's really good. And finally, if you're a little sick of the standard fantasy vibe, I'd point you towards Torment. Torment is such a great world building experiment. It's based on a tabletop RPG called Numenera that is awesome. I would tell you to try that. If the whole idea of like knights in shining armor and just wizards who live on the top of a tower, that kind of stuff is like, I feel like I've done this a million times before. Torment is the game that I'd point you towards. But those 3 are right now.
Those are the pillars.
The pillars.
The 3 pillars.
Okay.
Yeah, it's exciting to think of this, resurgence being at a state now where Obsidian can test the waters with Pillars 1 and say, is anybody interested in this type of thing? And then people say, hell yes! It's like, all right.
Bring it on!
And now we're at a point where they're making a sequel and they can expand this concept to such a large degree. I mean, is it just going to keep rolling? I wonder. Like, I want to see what this fan base is like going into Pillars 3, Pillars 4, the Pillars MMO.
I'd love to see it evolve to the point where there's 3D versions of these games.
Boo!
I think that it is a genre movement that is probably here to stay at this point. It's not everybody and their dog that's playing these kinds of games, but they are well loved by the people who do play them, who would be very happy to string from, okay, I finished this game and now I'm going to go on to the next one, because they're built now very much like video game versions of a tabletop campaign, right? Like they have great narration, great writing, really cool world building, characters that you care about. That's really why you want to dive in here. I would put what those developers are doing, whether you're talking about the guys who make Pillars or Torment or Divinity, I'd put their world building and storytelling up against the heavy hitters any day. People like BioWare and Bethesda and Rockstar. I mean, any of those other bigger RPGs with bigger budgets, right? With that, maybe those games are going to offer you a more cinematic experience. But in terms of just shaping a world and having great rule systems that work well together, these kinds of games are where it's at.
Awesome. So check out your review on the site. We also have a new Gameplay Today video, which Leo contributed as well in the booth too. So you can check that out. Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire. Thank you so much for watching this excerpt from the Game Informer Show podcast. You can subscribe to the audio version and listen to new episodes airing every Thursday. We cover big games on the horizon, games that we've just reviewed. We have long-form developer interviews, a lot of fun stuff. So check it out every Thursday.